Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Winfree, and what you're about to listen to is an old episode of a podcast I used to host called Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. This particular episode originally aired July 10th, 2015, and is the second installment of a discussion on the villains and the villainous presentation of the Terminator franchise. Part 1 was the first ever episode of Everyone Loves a Bad Guy, and that was myself and Mark Radulich talking. That's been re-aired at this point. This one, part two, is myself and Ronnie Adams. At the time, Ronnie Adams had his own podcast. It was the Screaming Boy podcast. That has since been discontinued, put on indefinite hiatus. I don't know exactly. But if you do like Ronnie at this point in time, you can support him on twitch.tv/misfits and miscreants. So if you're interested in that and the things he says and does, go give him a follow on Twitch. Follows are free. Yeah, that's where you can find him. All right. On this particular episode, before I throw it to my past self, me in 2015, oof, much fatter than I am now, about 20-ish pounds fatter than I am now, actually. Poor me in the past. I always feel bad that my past self turned into present me. But before I throw it to past me, let's pay a few bills here. First up, if you like music, and really, who doesn't? We are giving away a free 30 days of the Amazon Music Unlimited service. This is, for my money, the best streaming platform for music, podcasts, and other audio formats that's going on the web. If you're interested in it, if you have never tried it, again, we're giving you a free 30 days. The link is getamazonmusic.com/W2Mnetwork. There will be a link in the description below if you would rather click on that than type in a URL. But either way, you get access to 70 million plus songs, no muss, no fuss, no ads. If you like it at the end of that time period, you can keep it. If not, hey, you lost nothing. So give that a listen. Give that a click if you are so inclined. All right. Also, we are supported by Grammarly. For you listeners of the Everyone Loves a Bad Guy re-airs, Grammarly is offering a free download of the Grammarly software. Grammarly's AI-powered products help people communicate more effectively. Grammarly helps you, yes you, write mistake-free on Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and nearly anywhere else you write on the web. Grammarly corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, and spelling mistakes while also catching contextual errors, improving your vocabulary, and suggesting style improvements. To download Grammarly today, go to getgrammarly.com/W2Mnetwork. Again, that's getgrammarly.com/W2Mnetwork to download Grammarly for free. There will also be a link to that in the description below if you would rather just click on that. And with that out of the way, thank you all very much for enjoying the re-airings of this show. I really appreciate it. Some of you guys have found the show for the first time, and it's heartwarming to see something I enjoyed doing so much still have a bit of life to it. So thank you very much. Past me, it's all you, baby. I'm sorry for what happens in the future, but hope you guys enjoy the show.
When the devil is too busy and death a bit too much, they call on me by name, you see, for my special touch. To the gentlemen, I'm misfortune. To the ladies, I'm surprise. But call me by any name, anyway, it's all the same. I'm the fly in your suit, I'm the pebble in your shoe, I'm the bee beneath your bed, I'm the bump on every head, I'm the heel on which you slip, I'm the pin in every head, I'm the thorn in your side, makes you wiggle and writhe. And it's so easy when you're evil. This is the life you see, the devil tips his hat to me. I do it all because I'm evil, and I do it all for free. Your tears are all the pay I'll ever need.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, though why children are listening to this show is a little bit beyond me, but if you are, thank you for being here. This is Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. I'm Robert Winfree, and again, thanks a lot for being here. Tonight, this is a slightly nostalgic trip for me tonight, everybody. We're going to be talking about the Terminator franchise. Now, for those of you who have followed my show for a long time, you might remember the first ever episode, way back when, a couple of years, year and a half. I don't know exactly. I haven't looked up the exact date. But my first ever episode of Everyone Loves a Bad Guy, I had Mark Radulich on, and it was part one of what was supposed to be a two-part look at the villains of the Terminator franchise. Part two got delayed. I was supposed to do it with Stuart Lang. That wound up kind of falling through. Part two just got pushed back and pushed back and pushed back, and it became kind of a running joke, much like The Long Road to Ruin, never getting around to finishing the Rocky franchise. If you're a fan of the Casual Heroes, then, the death of Dean Ambrose. It's just, again, it just kind of turned into a running gag. And tonight I am under somewhat corporate order and creative mandate, by and large, to revisit that, and I'm fine with that. Terminator Genesis came out last week. It bombed horribly financially and critically. But it gives me a good enough excuse to talk about the Terminator franchise again. And I'm always down for that. Those first two are a couple of my favorite movies ever. And again, any excuse to talk about them. Who doesn't love killer robots? I mean, come on. They're awesome. All right, here with me tonight, Mark was unable to come back to potentially do part two. He's busy. He's got other stuff. And he, is just, he's the supreme overlord. I have to kind of, bow to his wishes. But joining me tonight, his first appearance on this show, he's been on, he runs the Screaming Boy Productions, been a member of the Radulich and Broadcasting Network for a bit now. You can find, again, Screaming Boy every, Saturday. I forget exactly what day it goes live. But Ronnie Adams is here with us. Ronnie, how the heck are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
No complaints. Thunderstorms got over with early, so I'm unlikely to lose power again like I did last night.
That's good. That's very good.
Yeah, losing power in the middle of trying to cover an MMA event is deeply frustrating. But
no, I don't doubt it.
Yeah, it got done at the end of the day, so I can only complain so much. It's a minor annoyance. All right, we're going to kind of go through these chronologically. Ironically enough, part one of this talked about Terminator 2 Judgment Day and Terminator 3. We didn't talk about Salvation because, well, it's awful. Just absolutely awful. Look, Mark was on record. That's nearly the worst big budget movie he's ever seen. It falls just behind A Good Day to Die Hard, which I have to agree, that's probably the worst. But we didn't talk about the first Terminator movie, and Arnold is kind of the, unstoppable killing machine. He mows down an entire police precinct. He's just, and again, I'm a big fan of these movies, the good ones at least. And so I'm curious, for you, from your perspective, the original Terminator, comes out in late 84, early 85, I forget the exact year. Sweeps the world from a financial standpoint and whatnot. So I'm curious for you, Arnold Schwarzenegger at that point in time, playing, very kind of straightforward. Again, he's playing a robot, and just being, again, unstoppable machine of death. How did that work out for you from as a fan? The first couple of times you've seen it, what'd you think of, what he was able to do?
Well, you look at the mere stature of the man in these movies, and he's horrifying anyway. And having someone like this just barreling at you, guns blazing and with no remorse, it was pretty terrifying. So I thought he was a perfect pick for it, especially in the first movie. Not a lot of lines, just straightforward killing machine. So it worked out well for me.
Well, 80s Arnie was, like you said, absolutely terrifying. This was not too long after, one of his Mr. Universe runs, I believe. He was jacked to the gills. That scene in the beginning when he punches through that punk's body, it's not that far out of the realm of possibility that Arnold might actually have the muscle mass to pull that off.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just looking at him today and then looking at him back then. I know that's not much a comparison because he's nearly 70. He's still huge, and he's still, freaking beast, to look at most of the time. But just the dude is just huge then, and like I said, he's just absolutely terrifying. If somebody came up to me and said, "Your clothes, I need them," I'm like, "Well, do you need anything else out of my closet? Because I really don't want you to rip my head off. Here's my wallet, my shoes, my keys, and a high five to go along with it. Take it easy, man."
The deed to my house. I got a car, maybe.
Exactly. I'm not saying no to the man.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to. I would have a really hard time saying no to him as well, given that circumstance. As again, he's huge, and Arnold at that time, not the greatest actor. He morphed into a pretty good. He morphed into a pretty good actor. He's not winning an Oscar anytime soon or anything, but he's a solid. I think he's fairly underrated in terms of, again, what he can actually do as an actor.
Right.
But at the time, he's relatively green as far as that goes. He's very, very flat. Yeah. Fortunately, that plays very well into what he's doing. He's, again, a robot. He's not supposed to have, emotions, a whole lot of variance to his voice. He's just, and it's a credit to both him and James Cameron that they're able to take what could have been, again, flat and uninspiring and turn it into something that is completely menacing.
Correct.
Anytime one of the things that kind of comes to my mind, he shows up at that precinct to see Sarah Connor, and the desk sergeant kind of just doesn't even really look at him, just turns him away. And that's where we get the famous "I'll be back" line. And he's got the sunglasses on, and something bad is going to happen. You as the viewer get a pretty serious chill going down your spine when.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, a few seconds later, he drives a car through the front of the building and proceeds to murder everyone inside.
It's relentless. I mean, he doesn't, you can shoot him, you can do whatever, and he just doesn't stop. So, yeah.
Now, I'm curious about the other thing that kind of really has to go out when discussing Arnold Schwarzenegger in the first Terminator. Arnie himself, again, very physically imposing, terrifying, has no problem handling weaponry. I mean, look, normally I tend to get on your case if you try to fire a shotgun one-handed because, no.
Right.
That's not how that works. But first of all, he's Arnie, so he's massive. And second of all, he's a robot. So again, fine, you can fire a weapon one-handed. I'm not going to pick that apart too much. But he handles himself very well.
Oh, absolutely. He can shoot a gun any way he wants. Any gun any way he wants. So
he's one of the few. Good. Sorry.
Go ahead. Oh no, you're.
I was just gonna say he struck me as one of the few actors who kind of really took the effort to be at least somewhat believable when firing a weapon. Because if you spend any time around firearms, and this is not a pro or this is not a debate from a political standpoint, but you spend some time around firearms, you start to realize that how most actors hold them, handle them, and whatnot is, well, it's pretty wrong.
Right. That absolutely. There's been very few movies that I've looked at because I have spent some time around firearms and different weapons. Mostly shotguns, hunting rifles. Being from West Virginia. But no automatic rifles really. But you look at them and you can kind of tell that, there's no way that, as awesome as he is, there's no way Bruce Willis can fire an automatic weapon one hand and be believable about it. That thing is going to go nuts. But when you put it in 6 foot everything, over 200 pounds of solid muscle, almost 300 pounds of solid muscle, it's pretty believable, especially when you realize, he's also playing a robot, So.
Yeah. Again, the rules bend just a little bit from time to time when you start dealing with, non-human physiology.
Right.
But I'm curious for you because for me, as, again, a fan, the first time I watched the movie, honestly, one of the scariest things that happens in that movie is after they try to blow him up with the giant fuel truck, and they think it's over. Reese and Sarah are kind of celebrating. I mean, they blew up a giant fuel truck. That explosion would have actually been much larger, but hey, what are you going to do? Budget constraints.
Right.
And in the background, out of this pile of flaming rubble, just kind of rises the metal, the endoskeleton of the Terminator with all of the living tissue burned away. And it's got these evil red eyes. I had the first picture up on the slideshow of this for anyone bothering to watch that. Is a picture of, the Terminator's head. And you've now thrown everything possible at this thing. And it stands up out of, again, flaming rubble. And this thing is not quite as intimidating as Arnie from a physical perspective because it's not as large. But its design is certainly the stuff of nightmares. I mean, skeletons have been a source of, fear for a long time because for very good reason. And now you've got a giant, unstoppable metal one that's chasing you. It goes from, an unstoppable force of nature with Arnie, but one that it still feels, as much as it's not human, because it looks human, it still feels like, okay, this is just a really tough guy in a lot of respects. Then, boom goes the truck, here's just the robot, and it goes from being, intimidating, intense to the stuff that kind of haunts your nightmares. If you're not sure what's around the darkened corner, you might think of, the metal robotic Terminator sitting around there being ready to jump out at you.
Right. And that was something that was really unexpected as well, because as, watching it for the first time, you kind of breathe a sigh of relief when the explosion happens. You're kind of like, holy crap, they finally, they may have finally done it. They may have stopped the unstoppable. It might be over. This is their chance to win. And then out walks the freaky, nightmarish skeleton of, it's one of those things where it kind of puts me in I hate to compare it to this, but it kind of puts me in the thought of a zombie flick, because those things are scary to me because there's really no stopping them. I mean, it's a horde of things that have no emotion, have no purpose other than just to kill, and that was his purpose, was just to kill. His sole mission was just to wipe her off the face of the earth, and even a fuel tank explosion that burned every bit of flesh off of him is not stopping him. So it was horrifying.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you with a bit of the zombie comparison. The difference being a singleton zombie is not all that intimidating, but you get 5 or more and you're kind of in trouble.
Right, absolutely.
Well, and I've had this discussion before. Terminator is at its core actually a slasher movie. It just kind of is dressed up as a sci-fi thriller action. Those are kind of how we classify it, how we dress it up. But at its core, it's again pretty typical slasher movie in the sense that you've got the final girl, and granted it's the only real target in this case. You've got the unstoppable killing machine, and you've got the person trying to help her. Right. I mean, again, bare bones, it's a very well done slasher flick. It's elevated by everything that has kind of gone into it.
Right, and I can absolutely agree with that. That's actually the first I've really heard of anybody, comparing it to a slasher flick. But the more the more you think about it, the more I think about it, the more I can compare him to, Michael Myers, because same emotionless, state, one purpose, and that's just to kill, and nothing seems to stop him.
Yeah, he again, there's a lot of kind of inspiration there from, Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, any of the silent kind of, I hate to say passionless, but, kind of the flat characters. Michael, not much of a character. Jason, not much of a character. They just exist to show up and murder people, and that's fine. That's what they're there for.
Right, absolutely. And Schwarzenegger played it to a T, and like you said, there wasn't much acting to be done in it, but it was perfect for him. I mean, you're coming off of Hercules in New York, for goodness sake. And
so
then,
bad they had to redub his lines.
Exactly. And then you go into Conan, and that wasn't much of a stretch for him either, but still, it was a good part for him. So he had some training in acting in that, and then you go straight into something it seems like he was born for, other than Conan, and just a phenomenal presence as the unstoppable killing machine. So to a T, man, loved it.
Well, and here's the other thing, and I bring this up frequently. It's actually not that easy to play a robot. You look at the number of actors who have tried and kind of fallen on their faces is a lot more extensive than the guys who have pulled it off successfully.
That's true. That is very true.
And he just kind of has the perfect blend of remorseless detachment and just enough menace from as much as you can get from a human standpoint. When he's sitting there buying all the guns, he buys all the guns from the store and proceeds to, at the end again, just blow the guy away. And the guy tells him, you can't do that. He's loading the shotgun right there. You can't do that. He says, wrong. And then proceeds to shoot him in the face.
Right. You can't tell him he's wrong. I mean, come on.
That's a bad idea.
Right.
The other thing I kind of want to touch on with this is not just the body count that the Terminator achieves, which is quite impressive when you consider it,
mm-hmm.
but he doesn't just, kill cannon fodder. He kills a couple of strong secondary characters, and he kills a major character. I mean, he actually gets to, again, Kyle Reese, played by Michael Biehn, dies at the end of this movie because of the Terminator. It's very rare that you get, it's not unheard of, but it's rarer that you get a villain who actually kills a flat-out main character, and he does.
Yeah. I mean, you've kind of got the damsel in distress situation going on with Sarah Connor at this point, because she's not the hard case, self-trained woman of war that she is in the second one. So she's a waitress. You've got that whole part of it, and so in comes your White Knight, and nobody expects the White Knight to get killed. So it put a little more, for me, it made that Terminator character, that whole persona, a little more terrifying, because he killed the White Knight. I mean, he killed the hero of the story. I mean, Sarah Connor's the hero, but you got you got Kyle Reese, who's supposed to be the one saving her, and he goes down. So what can stop this thing?
And even then, the heroes, it's not unheard of for the hero to sacrifice itself to defeat the enemy, but it still doesn't work. He sticks the bomb right into its torso, it blows up, and with one arm and just the upper body, it's still crawling after Sarah, trying to kill her.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's almost like I said, it's terrifying, because it will not and cannot stop.
Now, again, I mentioned this. I don't know if anyone out there listened to Mark and I review Terminator Genesis night before last. Excuse me, got my dates mixed up. But Kyle Reese's speech to her about what the Terminator is, it's very accurate, and it very much kind of sets the tone for what Schwarzenegger brings to the role. It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse, and it absolutely will not stop.
Yeah.
That's a terrifying, again, that same idea of just, kind of this thing that you're helpless before, by and large. I mean, it's one of the scariest things possible. It's that kind of feeling of helplessness in the face of something that you can't control or influence or manipulate that makes some of the better horror movies so scary. I mean, I brought up that same comparison when discussing, I believe, the first Paranormal Activity movie, which to this day still scary. Just wonderful movie, wonderful horror movie. Again, still scary. But, there's nothing you can do about that monster. And thankfully its name isn't revealed in there. It's just kind of the demon. But there's nothing. You can't do anything. You can't stop it. You can't there's nothing. It's just there, and it's going to kill you horribly.
Yeah. Right. And I think at our core, that's what scares us as people the most. Nobody likes to feel helpless at all. And going back to the whole zombie thing, you feel helpless when you've got this horde of things coming at you, and you feel helpless when even the bomb in the ribs and the good guy sacrifice doesn't stop it. It's just it's crazy to think about something coming at you and you can do nothing to stop it. So that in itself to me is what I think makes him the scariest. Is that just overwhelming feeling of helplessness.
To kind of segue into Judgment Day, that same feeling, it's really interesting how it's kind of handled, because they go with turning Arnold into a good guy, and that's kind of fair because at this point in time, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the actor, his star has risen considerably. It would be very difficult to sell that movie based on him being the villain again.
Right.
So they repurposed the role of the T-101, and so if the unstoppable killing machine from the first movie is now your hero, you need something worse to oppose it. You need something that you have a hard time seeing it overcome, and that's very difficult. Again, there's two ways you kind of go about that. One is you go bigger and badder, and finding someone bigger and badder than Schwarzenegger in 97 or whatnot was just not really going to happen.
Right.
So you had to go with technologically more advanced, faster, sleeker, better, instead of being bigger. And you get Robert Patrick as the T-1000, composed completely of liquid metal. And I don't think Robert Patrick is as scary as Arnie was in the first one. That being said, he brings his own kind of malice to this. Again, Schwarzenegger in the first one is very much, robotic. He is programmed to kill Sarah Connor, therefore he will kill Sarah Connor. The T-1000 and, again, Robert Patrick, I get more of a sense that he's enjoying what he's doing than I did with Arnie, with the first one. The first one is very clinical, very bloody and very violent at times, but very clinical. Then you get Robert Patrick, who is, he could kill people any number of ways. He made a conscious choice to, turn his finger into a long needle and stab it through the security guard's eye.
Right.
I mean, it's subtle because he's not, gleeful and over the top, as the traditional sadist might be. But there's definitely an overwhelming kind of sense of, he's enjoying this just a little too much. Right.
He brought just a hair of a sadistic, I guess you could say, humanity to it. Just like you said, like he's enjoying it too much, and it's not fair to compare the two, because it would be like comparing an axe to a surgeon's scalpel, or a monster truck to a Porsche. They'll both, the truck and the Porsche will both get you there, but they're going to get you there different ways. So it wasn't as scary to me because, like you said, I've never thought of it like as a slasher movie. But now that you've said it and I go back and think about it, it really is a slasher movie, and it has that horror feel, that horror movie feel to it. The second one is still Robert Patrick's terrifying, as T-1000 in his own right, because he could literally be anybody in your family or on the street or anything. He can, and you don't know where it's coming from, how it's going to happen. Needle to the eye, sword to the chest, something. and it could come from as we see, foster family, anything like that. So he was still scary. He was still villainous in his own way. And it was still, I thought that one, he did a phenomenal job in that as well as T-1000.
Yeah, and again, there are there's a couple of major fears within humanity that kind of get touched on in the first two Terminator movies. Again, the first one much more in the horror genre than the second by a long shot. But again, the first one you have inevitability and helplessness. In the second, you have the unknown. And I mean, in a lot of ways, that is what you don't know is exponentially more terrifying than what you do know.
Right, and that's where he hits, because you, like I said, you don't know where it's coming from or who he's going to be. I mean, he took on the form of someone that's supposed to help you when you're running for someone. He took on the form of a police officer. So you can't really trust the police in this. Not that they could do anything anyway. You can't trust your own family, so you go to the unstoppable killing machine from the first one that's been reprogrammed. And even it seems like even whatever he does doesn't do a whole lot.
No, I mean, the Terminator, Arnie's character dies for a couple of minutes at the end of this one.
Yeah.
Here again, unstoppable machine from the first one that, took everything and then some to finally put down. And he's outmatched in a lot of ways by Robert Patrick. Gets, impaled at the end. You think he's dead for a minute or two there. You think he's been overcome and it's going to fall to, the remaining humans to actually put him down. Thankfully, Arnie reroutes some power and whatnot and is able to kind of regain himself. But if he had actually died as a character after being, impaled viciously by Robert Patrick, that's completely believable at that point.
Yeah. And then if he had died at the hands of Robert Patrick, we may have never gotten Rise of the Machines.
And I can't say that would have been a bad thing.
Yeah, exactly. But, you go to, and it's the white knight scenario again. You go to the one person that's supposed to be helping you, and the villain, the Black Knight, the whatever you want to say, is supposed to be defeated by this character. And then when you see your white knight fall, it gives you once again, from not as much as the first one, but it gives you that feeling of hopelessness and inevitability. So it's really preying, like you said, on those human emotions of those fears of the absolute, going, crap, there's really nothing we can do to stop him.
Well, we get a great fake out right before that as far as beating the T-1000, because he gets, covered in liquid nitrogen and frozen. Then Arnie shoots him and he explodes. And you get a minute there where you're like, he was completely liquid. Now he's frozen solid. He's exploded. Maybe we got him. Maybe we.
Right.
And then, no, we're in a steel mill. Everything's hot. The stuff melts and reforms itself together, and you just kind of slowly go, "Oh crap!" I mean, this is, if for a professional wrestling comparison, that's the rough equivalent of smacking Brock Lesnar in the back with a chair, thinking, "Yeah," and then he just kind of slowly turns around, and your entire life flashes before your eyes.
I think that actually happened with the Hardy Boys at one point.
They hit him in the head. I think like Matt or Jeff, just full on baseball swing to the head, and he just took it.
Yeah, and almost smiled at them. So you've got the equivalent of Brock Lesnar, with swords as hands, which in its own right is more terrifying than anything I could think of. But
that would be. Yeah, thanks for that nightmare in the future.
My bad.
Don't worry about it. I've seen worse.
Not much, but...
No, not much, but I've certainly seen worse. All right. The last thing I want to touch on as far as Judgment Day goes, there's a weird kind of... I should probably save that one for 3, because he's not really a bad guy. He's just kind of an annoyance. Okay, the last thing I want to touch on then, again, with the Terminator character from the first, again, unstoppable, he makes the ultimate sacrifice at the end of Terminator 2 after they've defeated Robert Patrick's T-1000. They realize that Arnie's character comes to the realization that he has to be destroyed as well, completely and utterly, so that none of the futuristic technology that exists within him is able to be repurposed.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned the White Knight is supposed to help take down the dragon. Well, he does that here. They finally beat it, and then he still has to die. And I mean, for as flat basically as Arnie is in this movie, and not nearly as much as the previous one because the character calls for it, and he's a much better actor at this point in time. But watching the Terminator get lowered into the molten steel is still just a tad heartbreaking. Even though it's again emotionless killing machine basically, it's come to represent a lot more, and it's kind of like one final kick in the teeth. You beat good job. You beat the evil robot made of liquid metal. Oh, by the way, your hero, yeah, he's still not going to make it.
Well, yeah, it's you can almost say maybe the bad guy in a way with this, even though you know that even though he's sacrificing himself to make sure that Skynet, and it never happens, it's coming back, or at least you think you do, or I don't know if you did when you saw this movie the first time. I'm like, that can't be. But as he, the thumbs up as he's being slowly lowered into the molten metal and being melted away, but it's almost like you got to have some sort of sacrifice, but the bad guy almost kind of still wins because the good guy's got to die to save humanity.
Yeah, the notion of the Ulferic victory always comes back to bite you.
Right, absolutely.
And moving on to Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines. You and I talked a little bit about this off air. I have to mention, I have a lot of fun with Rise of the Machines. I'm not going to defend it as a good movie. Don't ever get me wrong on that one. I can't because it's not all that good, but it's I have a lot of fun with it by and large. And I'm curious for you because, first of all, I think a big weakness of Rise of the Machines is the villain. I think it's Christiana Loken who plays the TX.
Yeah.
I mean, from a design standpoint, the basic concept was we're going to combine the two previous Terminators. So this one has some shape-shifting abilities with liquid metal, but it's over a hardened skeleton, so we can't freeze it and blow it up like we did in the first one. And because we're into the 90s now, it should be a woman Terminator instead of a male Terminator. And it just seemed... For as much thought as went into aspects of that movie, you'd think they could have put more effort into crafting a villain who was actually memorable or threatening, intimidating, because I don't know about you, but I don't find there to be anything intimidating or threatening or remotely scary about, again, the TX. It's there because plot says it should be there. It's not
right.
anything approaching what either of the previous two villains were.
Not at all. And I think you said it best when you said it wasn't really memorable. It wasn't a memorable character. It wasn't a memorable villain. And therefore, it fell flat. I mean, it was not a good call on their part it felt too strained. It felt too, they were reaching too much with this one. It wasn't the choice of actress or anything like that, or the fact that they did make it a female Terminator. That's whatever, but it was too, okay, we've had the unstoppable endoskeleton with flesh over it, and now this one has it's all liquid metal, so it can change into everything. So what's scarier than those two things? Well, let's put them together and make the super Terminator. And it was just, for me, it was more laughable than it was anything.
that character, again, the TX, is one of the most unintentionally hilarious characters in any of these franchises, apart from, Christian Bale, because Christian Bale. But
Well, yeah.
But I mean, there's just, again, there's nothing really to it. It seems like it was just kind of played for, inside laughs. I mean, okay, there's a scene where she's dissatisfied with her breasts, so she grows them a little bit bigger. She steals, the clothing design, and it's just, I remember watching that going, okay, that's moderately funny, but so what? The villain in Terminator is not supposed to be funny.
Right.
The heroes can be funny. There can be moments of levity. And, I thought it was fine with Arnie, they repurposed the intro for Judgment Day. In this instance, instead of him going into, a biker bar, he winds up in a strip joint at ladies' night. Yeah. And I'm fine with that. That's funny. And that's okay. You can play things for laughs and have them still work. Your villain should not be funny. It should not be, anything approaching that. And the fact that they kind of went that way just really cut the legs out from under the character before it ever could have gotten going.
Exactly. Like I said, laughable, without meaning to be, or maybe they meant to be. I don't know. But
either way,
it wasn't scary. It wasn't. She wasn't a bad guy. It was more, like I said, strained and trying too hard to appeal to everyone, I guess. Whereas it should just be, she should just be terrifying and unstoppable and something new instead of mashing the other two back together.
Yeah, and again, it's not that they decided to go with a female Terminator. That can be fine. There's a distinct lack of both female villains and female action hero, whether that's hero or not, action-oriented characters. Right. And if you do it right, there's really no reason for that other than apparently people don't know how to write them correctly, which is on the writers. It could have been fine. There's no reason that a female Terminator can't work. But if your whole gimmick is it's an attractive woman, we'll have her do a couple of moderately erotic things throughout the course of this movie, and then, well, she's more advanced than Arnie, so clearly she can beat him up. No, it doesn't work. It seems it's flat, it's borderline pandering, and it doesn't connect with anything, much less the audience.
Exactly. I mean, oh gosh, what was that one movie where the main villain was it was Species? It reminded me too much of that horrible movie. I'm not a fan of those movies, and it was, you're playing towards the sexuality of the woman and not the the fact that she's an unstoppable killing machine. That should have been played up more than how she looks, or basically it. They were playing up to her looks and not what the character should have been.
And it's kind of sad because there's a few things she does early on. She shows up and starts killing people immediately, which is what the Terminator is supposed to do. I mean, she blows somebody away in a drive-through, knocks on the door to like a frat party, finds their target, shoots him in the head, and that's the type of stuff you're supposed to be doing with the Terminator. But the fact that none of the characters around her seem to respond all that well just because she's a woman, you can play that to your advantage. That can be an advantage from a storytelling standpoint, or it can be something that winds up just making everything seem exponentially less serious. Well, guess which way this one wound up going.
Exactly. That's exactly where it went. And, you couldn't take her serious. It was comical.
Yeah, it's really a shame because, again, I don't mind them going a slightly lighter tone with Rise of the Machines. But again, your villain still has to be intimidating. It still has to be scary. It still has to be a believable, credible threat to our heroes. Because if it's not, everything kind of falls apart. And again, I think that's in addition to, the fact that they went more comedic with this doesn't bother me, but again, the Terminator franchise is a very serious, very dark, kind of almost fatalistic franchise by and large. Going more comedic and self-referential, it's a bit jarring from a tonal standpoint, but it can still work. I maintain the biggest problem is you don't have a credible villain in this movie. I mean, the discussions of Skynet and it's being a, software in the cloud, even though the cloud wasn't a thing when this was made. But again, it's software, not hardware. Their desperate attempt to shut it down is more convincing. Again, you have a non-existent. Again, you have the MacGuffin here. You have a thing, not a character, that is oddly more compelling than your character. And that's a pretty massive failure on the part of everyone involved in this.
Right, absolutely. And like you said, when Skynet is more more interesting than what's supposed to be chasing and killing, then there's a big problem.
And look, Rise of the Machines probably should have been the last entry into this franchise. Unfortunately, and I mean that deeply and sincerely, several years later, I forget how many, closer to 10 than 5, if memory serves, we get Terminator Salvation. And I could do a whole podcast on the issues with this movie. You spend too much time with Sam Worthington, who was in the midst of his 18 months of look at me, I'm in everything, and then faded away into obscurity, which everybody kind of goes through. It's okay. If you're really good, after that 18 months, you still have work. If not, you're Orlando Bloom or Sam Worthington or... Oh, there's one other guy who really kind of fits that mold, and I can't remember his name. But again, you get a guy who's just, they kind of peak in popularity, and if there's nothing there, they fade away. If there's something there, they stick around. And Worthington kind of faded. So there is that. But you spend too much time with him. You've got Christian Bale as John Connor, who doesn't do anything but scream for no apparent reason. Right. I mean, it's sad that this movie is supposed to be the war between the humans and the machines. Now, I don't know how you screw that up. I really don't. And yet, they did.
Yeah, it was not good.
I
will place it, for me, I place it a little higher than Rise of the Machines because of, well, I hated Rise of the Machines a lot, but it wasn't good. I mean, I wanted it to be good, therefore I think I liked it more than I should have when I first saw it, just for the hope that it was good. But the more I watch it and think about it, I've watched it 2 or 3 times and just wanting it to be good, and they screwed it up. Just like you said, how do you screw something like that up? But they did epically.
Well, look, Mick G's kind of a buffoon. I mean, let's be perfectly frank about that. And not to say that there aren't things that he's done that I've enjoyed, because there are. You just he has to be making things that kind of fit within a very limited skill set that kind of works within his buffoonery.
Right.
And that's okay. I've got a soft spot for the first Charlie's Angels movie. I think it's fun. It's not, again, I'm not going to defend it as all that good for the most part, but I think it's a fun kind of homage to the series. But again, he tries to do anything serious. It fails pretty miserably. Anything too comedic, it just comes off as far too hokey and incoherent. And again, you just have to, there's a very limited number of things he's going to be able to do very well. And the Terminator franchise is absolutely not one of them.
Right. No, I completely agree with you.
God. I honestly wish we'd had, first of all, a more competent director, and second of all, the original ending. I thought that was a ballsy ending. And it was really sad that they didn't go that way.
Absolutely. I still don't understand that call.
Well, the script leaked several... Just as it was going into production, somebody leaked the script, and so they had to rewrite it, which bothered me because, again, we got a half-assed ending, and we got and we lost out on what could have been a very interesting, very good direction to take things up. For those of you who don't know, and I assume most of you do know, but for those of you who don't, I don't want this to go over for you guys to sit there going, wait, what are these two guys talking about? What original ending? The original scripted ending for Terminator Salvation actually saw John Connor die in that final assault on the manufacturing plant. To preserve what John Connor represented, they actually took his face and grafted it onto the machine character played by Sam Worthington so that John Connor could continue on. And I thought that was it was an interesting idea. If you execute it properly, that's borderline genius. Sadly, again, well, first of all, we had incompetent people, and then it got leaked, so they went a different direction, so on and so forth. I think, again, I have to bring this up again, a major failing of this movie, in addition to ping-ponging your point of view around, is the lack of villain. You've got, career character actor Michael Ironside, who I like the guy, as kind of a hard-ass, won't listen to anyone military leader. And he butts heads with John Connor because Connor knows the future, apparently, more or less. And this guy is not, you're nobody. You crawled out of the rubble of this, government shelter. I've been a soldier my entire life. Sit down, shut up, and take orders. So you get some friction there, but he's not a villain. He's at best a minor antagonist. You don't have, the closest thing you get to a legitimate villain is computerized Helen Bonham Carter as the voice of Skynet, and that was just a horrible decision. I mean, that was just, I don't understand that at all. It makes no sense to me. And then you get a little bit of, kind of computerized mid-'80s Arnie back to fight things out, and that was fun.
Yeah.
But this one feels like Mark Radlich has made this comparison whenever I talk about weak villains. It felt like a video game boss. You're going through a video game and, there's a minor boss here. You have to, get around Michael Ironside, and there's a few other guys around here. Oh, that Terminator is marginally more difficult to kill than the others. There's your second one. And here's the mastermind with Helen Bonham Carter on, monitors. And final boss is Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator. And there's nothing to any of them, and it really hurts the overall movie.
Right. That's a beautiful comparison.
Yeah, I'm not above stealing stuff when it's called for. Again, Mark's been on this show a couple of times, and whenever we get to a movie that feels accurate, that's the one he brings up. And again, I feel it's apt here. A couple of the Disney movies we talked about, he mentions like the Red Queen specifically from Alice in Wonderland just felt like a final boss rather than a character.
Yeah.
So I'm curious for you, again, I think we all wanted Terminator Salvation to be good. We really did. But I'm curious for you, just so we're not just kind of bashing this thing wholesale. What would you have done to maybe kind of make this better?
Where do I start? I mean, just like you said, I'm not bashing it to be bashing it. There's so many ways this could have been better, but to me, if you had taken the storyline and shown what the actual war between the machines and the humans, and make it almost a kind of a war movie, I think it would have been better. If you catch my drift on that.
Oh, I absolutely do. I think that was a major flaw that they did. There's no battle sequences this is the war, and you don't have a single decent battle sequence.
Exactly. I mean, there's nothing really happening in this war. So is it fair to even call it a war between the humans and the machines? And from this movie, and I don't think it is a fair comparison, to call it a war. And that would have been my major thing, just an overhaul of the script. Use some of that $200 million that was in the budget to make some epic battle scenes. Find as a fan, I'm a Christian Bale fan, but I don't think he did John Connor any justice in this. I don't know who I would have picked, thinking, off the top of my head, but definitely
I don't think
somebody
anyone
different.
could have saved it. I think it was poorly written and poorly directed, and the actor just happened to catch a lot of the backlash because of it.
I can agree with that. So maybe even keeping him in there, but it was overall it was boring.
Which is the last thing your Terminator movie should be.
Right. There was no sense of hopelessness. There was no sense of urgency. There was nothing that the first two Terminators brought to the table. That in this, there was no definite. Other
It's
than
not even the fatalism that you get with 3. I mean, for as much as Rise of the
Right.
Machines has things that go wrong with it, the overarching notion of inevitability and kind of accepting what you're supposed to do comes through in that, whereas this is just kind of there.
Yeah, it has no point, I guess. There would have been a definite point to it. What were they going to do when they sent these machines, back to the past to kill, save, whatever is going on there. And your main bad guy, the main boss, I guess you could say, is the very first Terminator. Why not see a little more of him, or why not see a little more of just any Terminator, anything? Just give me something to look at in this.
Some kind of avatar for Skynet that we can affix our malice towards.
Exactly. Other than Bonham Carter on a screen. I mean, that's not a villain. That's just more annoying than anything.
Yes. If I were to do this, I wouldn't mind keeping Christian Bale as John Connor. I would have turned him into the villain, actually. If you're going to keep the primary ending of we're replacing Connor, he's going to die, I think maybe to kind of facilitate that, you turn him into a monstrously tyrannical dick.
Right.
And he's not incompetent, but just maniacal, little bit crazy, and then to cap it all off, and you still can introduce the Sam Worthington humanoid robot, robot with feelings, emotions, and whatnot. And he winds up taking over that role and just becomes exponentially better at it, more inspiring and whatnot than than the original John Connor ever could have been. That's just my idea.
That's a fantastic idea.
We're down to 2.5 minutes of live time. We've still got to talk about Terminator Genesis and do plugs. So to anyone out there listening live, God bless you. Thank you very much for that. Come back in about 20 minutes if you want to hear the rest of the show. To everyone else, I try to do this whenever I do these things live, and we're going to go over so that people who are listening live tend to know. All right, we've got someone on the phone lines. I'll go ahead and take this call here. Area code 740. I should probably know that, but I don't off the top of my head. What's on your mind? We're talking the Terminator franchise here.
Gentlemen, it's Jesse Starcher, and I only have one thing I wanted to add, and this was just to, I didn't have the opportunity to discuss Terminator Salvation last night.
Robert
Winfree, I think you're aware of this. But the only thing I wanted to add was I went to I think it was the weekend of or the weekend after that Salvation released. And that was Terminator Salvation. And that same day, me and my buddy hit that movie, and then we hit Wolverine. And I walked out of the theater going, Wolverine blew Terminator out the water. I mean, seriously. And when you think about as much flack as Wolverine gets, that movie gets nowadays, that's saying something. So I just kind of wanted to again add just kind of support how bad Terminator Salvation was.
Every time I've seen it, I've walked away thinking I can't find a single redeeming quality to this movie. I can't think of a single positive thing to say. Not a one. And that's nearly a first.
Yeah. But that's all I had to add, gentlemen. I just want to pop in and explain my side of things and why I thought, it's just bad, folks. It's bad. Now, I look forward to hearing I don't have any idea about Genesis, so I look forward to hearing about this. So I will graciously leave you boys to it. A good show so far, and I'll be listening prior to the overrun here.
All right, Jesse, thanks for calling in.
Later.
All right, good guy, Jesse Starcher. Runs source material
Absolutely.
every Monday here on the Rad Legend Broadcasting Network to get an early plug-in. All right, let's move on to Genesis here. You've seen it. I've seen it. I reviewed it. I'm going to retread a lot of that ground here. But before I get into my spiel, because I've got things, I just want to get your kind of unadult. I just want to get your opinion of, again, they turned John Connor into a robot for this, and anyone who saw a preview for this movie knew that was coming, which horrible decision from a marketing standpoint. Absolutely horrible.
Yeah, terrible.
But they turn him in again. So he's a robot. This is, in a lot of ways, I feel like this is kind of a retread of the TX in terms of function. It's metal skeletal structure with not liquid metal, but phase metal over it that lets him kind of manipulate what he looks like, things of that nature. So I'm curious for you as a fan, when you saw it, how did Jason Clarke's John Connor as the T-3000, because everything's got to be 1,000 apparently. Sarcasm aside, how did that play for you?
I tend to stay away from most spoilers, and hearing that there was going to be a major spoiler in the posters and everything, I stayed away from it. So it kind of came as a surprise to me when that happened.
God bless you, sir. I don't know how you did that.
I don't watch a whole lot of TV. I watch a lot of movies.
Oh, that helps.
Yeah. So it was a little surprising. For me, it was a different spin on it. To a point of, like you said, it was a little bit of a rehash from Salvation, but I think it was done better. It worked for me. It did. I don't know why. I can't explain it. I think because I was expecting nothing in this movie, absolutely nothing. And I was pleasantly surprised when I got a little bit of something. And I think that's why it worked for me mostly. But I enjoyed his John Connor. I enjoyed the human aspect of the Terminator, the new Terminator, which made it, it could potentially make it a little more terrifying because not only can it look like anybody in your life or anybody on the street, it can also convey human emotion and literally be anyone. So that's why it worked for me. But was it my favorite out of the franchise? Absolutely not. I think mostly it worked because I didn't expect much out of it.
Managing your expectations is an important factor with some of these things.
Yeah.
Honestly, this is going to sound a little weird, but first of all, disclosure, I'm not a fan of Jason Clarke, by and large. He's not as flat as, Jai Courtney or whatnot. He's not flat, but he's not an exceptional actor by any stretch of the imagination. When I saw the version of the metallic version of this Terminator, the one that, has no outward human appearance, I really kind of wanted to go, well, why don't we get more of that? Because that looks, it's not as full-on skeletal as, Arnie in the first one. It's still got some, very good visuals to it. And I wanted more of that and less of, Jason Clarke, but part of that's just me, I guess. I had a hard time with Jason Clarke's performance because the idea kind of being presented with him, and this is a gripe about the movie in general, that this is never touched on more than once or expanded on at all. He's now kind of dealing with where does the melding of man and machine, where humanity ends and where the machines begin. We get one look at that when they first come into 2017. They're in the hospital and everyone's walking around staring at their tablets or iPhones or what have you. And it's sad because it's never, again, it's not expanded on. It's barely mentioned. And it's sad because there's so much that could have been done with that. And my other big issue with this version is he doesn't get scary until the very end. So much of what he's doing, and I really wish they had kind of thought this out better from conception to execution, because what he's supposed to be early on when you meet him is just supremely confident in his own indestructibility. They can shoot him, they can drop him off of buildings, they can light him on fire, they can do whatever. It's not going to bother him in the least. So he's able to just kind of, give promos through gunfire and explosions and whatnot because they can't hurt him. And he is more than aware of his own infallibility as far as that goes. And it never comes across as the kind of terrifying aloofness or superiority that it should have. Okay. Arnie was unstoppable monster, so he gets shot, he just doesn't care. The T-1000 responded to it, but none of it impacted him because he's made entirely of liquid, so he can just reform around anything. But they still responded to enough. When you put forward enough physical force, they responded just by the laws of physics. Now you've got someone who just doesn't care about any of that. And the reality of that situation, that everything that worked before, big explosions, compression, heat, cold in the extreme, none of that is going to work. That should be terrifying. That, we've faced the impossible in the past in this franchise, and we've always found a way to kind of get around it. Well, not so much this time. Everything that you've tried before doesn't work. And he comes across a bit more kind of pleading than he does just completely uncaring about everything they're trying to do to him physically. And I think that's a flaw, because if he is that unconcerned and disconnected with all of these things that are potentially fatal, then when he actually decides, okay, I've had enough of you people poking at me, you should absolutely vacate your bowels in terror. And it doesn't play that way. It's just kind of, again, he gets a little bit scary when he actually starts doing stuff at the very end, his fight with Arnie. But at that point, they've also established, okay, there's a way to beat him. He doesn't like magnetic fields. And, what's the only thing that works in the time displacement? Well, the quantum magnetic field. I wonder what that's going to lead. But it's, and I mean, this is certainly a step up from both 3 and 4 in terms of villain presentation. I tend to just be a little bit saddened because I feel there's 3 or 4 things they could have done and tweaked that would have made him so much more intimidating and so much more memorable than he wound up being.
I can see that. I really can. But I enjoyed his, like I said, it may have been to where I was expecting nothing and got a little bit of something, but I enjoyed him as John Connor / T-1000 because of the emotion, because of the fact that he's pleading with them to join him because it can be so much better on the other side. Someone who was dead set against this, who was the leader of the resistance, is now part of what they were resisting against. And
Mark mentioned this. He's seen so much of, okay, the machines always trigger Judgment Day and wipe out, 3 to 4 billion people, but they can never win after that. The humans always win afterwards. So no matter what we do, there's always this inevitable massive casualty, trauma, and whatnot to both sides. How about we just join together? We can circumvent all of this, and we can build a better future. And don't get me wrong, I wouldn't have joined with him either, because I kind of like being human as opposed to being a machine manipulated by a master computer. But his point is not invalid, and the best villains are those who believe they're in the right. And this version of the John Connor T-3000, what have you, it firmly believes that what it's doing is the correct way to do things.
Right.
And there's a lot to be said for that.
And there's a lot to be said for it being your one infallible hero, the one that you know is always going to be on the side of quote unquote right, of who's going to be against the machines, and all of a sudden he's their number one fan. He's the one holding the sign up for him, cheering them on. And not only is he their fan, but he's willing to kill to make sure that that his new best friends are going to be the ones come out on top. And so you've got that point, of
I really wish they
the hero
hadn't
turned villain.
I really wish they hadn't spoiled that in the previews, because again, it was just the second preview I was watching for the movie. It's like, oh, good preview for Terminator. Okay, I'm kind of looking forward to this. And wait a minute, that was the biggest plot twist you could have possibly thrown at the world, and you just gave it away for free. I no longer have any reason to see your movie other than to potentially watch stuff blow up, and I'm just not that interested in watching stuff blow up under this circumstances type of thing.
Right, and going back and looking at of how they did it with the movie poster and the trailers and everything, I'm blown away. Why in God's name would you do that? I mean, that's millions of hundreds of $1 million lost and wasted, giving away the ending, giving away the twist of your movie. That's like the Sixth Sense coming out right out of the gate saying, spoiler alert, Bruce Willis is dead. Watch this little boy talk to a dead guy the entire time. That's your twist. That's your gas.
That's your
moment.
hook
That's
for the second and third act.
Exactly. That's a holy crap moment that's completely and utterly wasted. And I think, in my opinion, that's why it fell flat with a lot of people. And that's why it bombed, because there's no reason.
Help.
There's literally, there's literally no reason, like you said, for anybody to go see this movie now, because they know the ending. They know what's going to happen.
Also in Terminator Genesis, during our final assault on Skynet, we get another kind of villain going with the projected avatar of the Skynet consciousness that rapidly evolves from small child to grown man. And I'm curious for you, because, I can't get too angry at the character and the writing for being overly robotic, because, again, it's a computer.
Right.
I really wish there had been more kind of menace coming out of that character, because you're just a disembodied voice. You're kind of fighting for your life here. And I really just wanted just a little bit more out of that, instead of just kind of the tried and true, you can't stop this, you're all going to join me in the end, I am inevitable, blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, I've heard every, generic mustache twirling villain speech ever, and congratulations, fall right in the middle of that pack.
I think the biggest downfall for me was, as well as he did, I just kept seeing the Doctor when he was doing his thing, and I don't think Matt Smith was as villainous as it needed to be to play that Skynet. Like you said, there was no urgency in his character in what he was doing. There was no menace. There was no. If you're going to create a Terminator that has emotions, then you're going to show a little bit of emotion yourself. There was no anger. There was no passion behind it, and it was just kind of like, you can't stop it. I'm a teenager now. Okay, now I'm the Doctor. You can't stop me. It's going to happen anyway. It's just for me, it was kind of like shut him up. Thank you for shooting the things and making him go away. So I think that's. In that aspect, I think John Connor was a better villain.
Oh, much. And that says something, considering all the issues I have with that character. more the lost
Right.
potential than the actual presentation. But
Right.
either way, it's just, I mean, come on. You could have, I almost wanted that to be, instead of so flat, a little more bombastic. I also wanted it to be threatening. Let's put a little
Yeah.
menace. Let's put a little, when he says, I mean, he's going to he's going to rain nuclear death over more than 50% of the human population. Can we get a little bit of, maybe a little menace coming out of this instead of something that cold?
Right. Yeah, it's just like, well, guess what? Here comes nuclear death. I'm not real worried about that. I'm not.
You're not selling me
you're not
on
showing
this,
me
sir.
anything. Right.
I'm
We're
starting to think
probably
you're
going to stop
bluffing.
you. Right. Exactly.
All right. Now, I think that's it. I don't think there's anyone else in that movie worth talking about as far as villains go. Those are kind of the primary ones. I just kind of final thoughts. This is a franchise that peaked very early with 1 or 2, depending on your perspective. I think 2 is the better film. I enjoy 1 more, personally. Though, again, 2 is better from a craft standpoint and whatnot. It's certainly a budget standpoint. I've just got, there's something about the slightly well-made, lower budget, again, slasher movie that is the first Terminator that very much appeals to me personally. But either way, the first 2 is kind of it. Everything else is downhill rather steeply. So just kind of final thoughts on, the villains of this franchise, because again, killer robots, they're awesome. And incidentally, if Matt Smith does not craft it at some kind of Dalek-looking thing for the sequel to Genesis, if they make it, then I will be severely disappointed.
Yes, absolutely.
So again, just kind of final thoughts on, again, the villains of the franchise overall, what it takes for them to be successful, and then we'll go ahead and do plugs and get out of here.
Okay. To be successful in this franchise, oh goodness. I mean, you're going to have to go back to the first one for me, and take a look at what Arnold did, and how cold and calculating and horrifying he was as the Terminator, or even he was a steamroller, and then you've got the cold calculating Dr. Scalpel that was Robert Patrick. There's no humor in them. There's no emotion. There's no like I said, the emotion was scary to the point of he could be anybody that you want him to be or that he wanted to be in Genesis. But I think the fact that they just don't care who gets in their way is scarier to me in the first 2. So I think for me, it's going to be, you got to take a look at everything that they put into it or didn't put into it, however you want to look at it, in the first 2 Terminator movies, and kind of draw from that to be a successful franchise.
Yeah, I completely agree. You've got to have, again, the unstoppable monster. It has to be, I think the primary thing here is, first of all, it has to be scary. And to do that, again, the way you represent that on screen is partially with the body count. That was my other kind of gripe with this version of John Connor, is I think he kills all of 4 people.
Right.
And, I mean, look, we don't need, again, this does not have to be graphic. This does not have, and I'm not, again, I don't want piles and piles of bodies. I don't think, and I talked a little bit about this when I reviewed it, I don't think that going for a PG-13 rating with Terminator is a bad thing. You just have to be aware of what you have to do to compensate for your inability to, have a lot of violence and a lot of bodies. And I don't feel they adequately did that, but that's slightly different discussion. But that, again, unstoppable, and each one of them has to be a little bit different. You can't just do the same thing, but you have to find what makes them scary within your story. And part of what made John Connor so scary was not just his superiority, but his conviction. And again, fanatics are scary because you can't, more than you can't reason with a machine, you can't reason with a fanatic.
Right.
And I feel like they should have maybe played that aspect up a little bit more as well. But again, what might have been. But that's kind of where the John Connor Terminator is more successful than the others because there's something to him. He firmly believes completely in his cause, and you're either going to join him or you're going to die. And that
Right.
that's a scary place to start. It was certainly much better than, anything that they did with 3 or 4. Vast improvement from a villain standpoint there.
Absolutely.
And again, I really have to mention this again. You need a body count. Doesn't have to be astronomical, but you have to represent to the people that these things are uncaring. And even if they're not uncaring, that they're willing to kill things. And John Connor in Salvation, not Salvation, in Genesis, was working side by side with a lot of the people at Cyberdyne Systems, and that just it didn't quite jive in the sense that could we get a couple of sequences of him killing people to establish that he's a villain in addition to his message? Let's have a few people kind of turn him down and have him react badly to it.
Well, it's just like you said, he's a fanatic, and he's got the idea of join him or die, but nobody's really dying. So
not a whole lot of people were joining him either, as far as I could tell.
Right, exactly. I mean, they were kind of on board. They weren't going to really fight him on it, but there were questions raised, and if you believe wholeheartedly in the join me or die, if questions are raised, you're going to do something to get rid of those questions. So they're not,
and usually it's going to be violent.
Right. And there was no violence in that, and there was no join me or die. There was just, hey, why don't you join me, and I don't know, get in a tickle fight with you or something. I don't know, but it was there was, like you said, there was no urgency behind that whole point.
Which is sad, but at least this was a step in the right direction, and I really. For as many issues I have with this movie, and as much as it's probably going to bomb, there's several Asian markets it hasn't opened in yet, including China. And in contemporary filmmaking, how your film does in China is just about as important as how well it does in America. Right. It might be able to make its money back. It might be able to warrant a sequel. And if it does, I hope we can keep making strides that we've made in this one, because it's a decent enough first step. For all the flaws I have and the issues I have with it, it's a good first step if you're going to keep moving along that path. You can't move laterally. You have to keep going forward.
Right, absolutely. Maybe we'll get back to the hopelessness of the first Terminator and just absolutely, have the menacing, emotionless killing machine that we had in the first one.
I wouldn't hate it. Go back to what works, and simplicity works. I mean, it said something that in a lot of ways, the T-1000 in the beginning of Genesis, played by the Korean actor, Tai Bong-hyun? I can't remember all of his... I know a few I'm aware of a few different Korean, both actors and fighters, and I'm relatively sure I'm going to confuse both syllables and names. But I had a great time with him because he kind of channeled what Robert Patrick did, and he's a fine actor.
Yeah.
I've got to say, real briefly, if you don't mind reading subtitles while watching a movie, and personally I don't, he's in a really good a Korean film called I Saw the Devil, and does a really great job in that.
I was wondering where I saw him.
Yeah, no, he's the secret. He's the agent from I Saw the Devil, which I'm a big fan of that movie in particular. And it was nice to see him get to do a few things before he died. He very much kind of channels Robert Patrick, but he's suitably threatening for a first act villain.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know how I forgot about him, but he did fantastic as the T-1000. So, and it was really kind of cool to see him in the 1984 part of the movie. But then again, time travel gets a little wonky for me. So
it most certainly can. Again, I firmly believe there's two ways you go with time travel. That's simplistic in that you have a device that lets you travel through time, and then you set up very specific rules for how everything interacts. a la Back to the Future. Very simple. Flux
Yeah.
capacitor causes time travel. Don't screw up anything too much. Things take a while to take effect on you if you're messing with the timeline. But very simple, and just tell a good story within that. Or you go hyper-realistic, a la Primer, and give your viewer migraines. The good kind, but still, migraines.
Yeah.
All right, that's going to go ahead and wrap us up. What do you got to plug?
Well, as you said at the top of the show, Adam Runyon and I, we both have a podcast called Streaming Boy Productions, where we do movie reviews and actor. We go over certain actors and the best movies thereof, and we've been trying to tackle most of the summer movies that have been coming out, and just recently we did Inside Out and went over some Pixar movies, and that was with Brian Pate. And before that, we actually did a Mel Brooks review with Jesse Starcher and Jason Teasley. Jason Teasley of the Cheap Seats, and went over top Mel Brooks movies. Went over a little bit of his life and some interesting facts about him. And actually, at one point, I gave my top Mel Brooks movies and let them discuss and disagree or agree. And Jason Teasley got mad and quit the show. So that was kind of fun.
If Young Frankenstein is not number one, you have failed. I'll say that.
Well, I will. Spoiler alert: you and I will get along very well then. And but he did not agree with me. So, but and I've done a couple of shows.
Is great. Blazing Saddles is great. Robin Hood Men in Tights is fine. There's a lot of the man has an extensive and very great filmography. I think a lot of his other stuff tends to kind of refer to itself a bit too much in a lot of ways. And Young Frankenstein is perfect as a standalone. If you have to introduce someone to the comedy of Mel Brooks, I think you show them Young Frankenstein.
I would agree with that. Young Frankenstein, and then two other movies that a lot of people don't really back me up on would be High Anxiety and Silent Movie. Silent Movie just for the sheer fact that there's only one word spoken in the entire movie, and that's at the end, and it was spoken by Marcel Marceau, the silent movie actor, and it's just the word no. So I love that. But we had a lot of fun on that. I've done some episodes. We just got done with the new Secret Wars #4 on source material with Jesse Starcher, and we've done some other episodes of that. That was a lot of fun. So we have a website, www.screamingboy.com. Check us out on Facebook and follow us on Twitter @ScreamingBoyPR.
All right. As always, follow the Radulich and Broadcasting Network on Facebook to get your most reliable and consistent updates. Yesterday, Mark Radulich, Sean Comer, and Jesse Starcher were on The Long Road to Ruin talking the first 3 Terminator movies. Mark refuses to acknowledge salvation. I will continue to make fun of him for that.
That's funny.
I understand his point about not wanting to review it. It was meant to start its own trilogy, and had they gotten even a second movie out of it, I would have completely agreed with leaving those two off and being an independent story. They didn't. It's a standalone movie that falls within the context of the franchise. You should be able to do 4 movies in an episode. You don't do more than 4, but you should be able to fit 4 in. And if I had to rewatch, I should stress, Hellraiser Revelations, I think they should have been able to cover Salvation. But apart from that, all right. This coming Monday, Jesse Starcher has source material. Tuesday, I'm not sure. I believe there's a Cheap Seats that Jason Teasley hosts. I'm not sure about that. Wednesday will be Mark and myself reviewing DreamWorks Animation's Minions, which ought to be fun because, Minions, they're awesome. I'm worried about this movie. I haven't seen it yet. I'm worried about the side characters and the gags being the focal point of an entire movie. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but I'm hopeful that I'll at least laugh through parts of it. So we'll see how that works out. But anyway, this Wednesday, Mark and I will review that. Thursday will probably be the Metal Hammer of Doom. On Thursdays, if there's not a Long Road to Ruin, there is a Metal Hammer of Doom. That's that's Mark Radulich and Robert Cooper. And if you're a metalhead, it's a good show. So tune in to that.
Yes.
I will be back next week to review, in honor of the movie Minions, the best evil sidekicks. I think that'll be a lot of fun, so tune in for that. Every Sunday, I host the 411 Ground and Pound radio show, your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. Normally, that's at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This week, because there is the finale of The Ultimate Fighter Season 21 that no one cares about, that Sunday evening, we have a special start time of noon Eastern. I will be reviewing UFC 189, which takes place tomorrow, the 11th of July. I will be previewing the Ultimate Fighter Season 21 finale. I will be previewing UFC Fight Night 71 that Wednesday, and I will be previewing UFC Fight Night 72 from Scotland that goes live on Saturday. So tune into that. I'm going to be talking myself hoarse, and I believe Andrew Graham said he'd show up and help me out as far as that goes. Because my normal cohort in crime, Jeff Harris, is in the middle of San Diego Comic-Con, and I completely understand why he's priorities, people, and that takes priority over the show. And if I were in his position, I'd be doing the same thing. All right, but that is going to wrap us up. Again, I'll be back next week, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's pretty much every time. I'm pretty consistent about that. Ronnie, thank you for being here. Saves me talking to myself for 90 minutes.
Hey, well, thank you for having me. I had a lot of fun, man.
All right. Let me know anytime you have another idea if you want to come back on. I don't mind. I take requests. I don't mind. I have a revolving door of co-hosts here, and I'm perfectly content with it being that way. All right.
Absolutely.
So for Ronnie Adams, I'm Robert Winfree, reminding you all that you can't stop the Terminator. It is an unstoppable killing machine. You need a giant press, pool of lava, something along those lines. But if your Terminator is goofy or non-existent or doesn't kill anyone, it's not that scary, and your heroes are therefore less heroic. As we always say here, be well, be safe, and behave, and I'll see you all next week. Thanks for being here.
So say good night to the bad guy.